Good evening,
Good
everyone.
evening, everyone.
Welcome to another edition of the Monsters Den. I am Pete Pardo, and up top we have Mr.
Rich
Rich
Catino,
Catino.
back to the den.
Back to the den, back to the Monsters Den. Today we enter the House of Hammer. For me, one of the premier horror film companies of all time. From Great Britain, home to so many legendary creature features and gothic horror. I mean, so many films. We could do endless episodes talking about Hammer. But you got to start somewhere, right? So Rich and I have each picked out 3 favorite films that we want to talk to you about today that hopefully you'll get a chance to go and watch during this Halloween season, because we don't have much time before Halloween, right? We're getting pretty close.
Next week.
Yeah, we're getting really close.
Yeah, this is the last weekend before Halloween weekend.
That's right. So there's going to be a lot of horror and monster film watching this weekend, I think.
Yeah.
At least in this house, anyway.
Yeah, I will. I know there's a bunch coming up on the weekend, too, that I'm going to watch. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But next weekend, Halloween weekend, does start, if you're a Star Wars fan, The Mandalorian.
That is correct.
So I think my horror might have to take a step aside just for the night so I can watch The Mandalorian kick off.
Got to watch The Mandalorian. I got to get caught up on The Boys season 2. There's a lot of stuff to watch.
Too.
Yeah,
I know. That's a good show.
So I'm going to have Rich kick us off with his first selection of the night.
Okay. So for those people that don't know, I'm wearing a Universal Monster shirt, the classics. These are the black and white ones. So after these were done, Hammer kind of reinvented the wheel, sort of, with what Universal was doing. Took those classic monsters, but updated them for the modern age, for the 50s, 60s, and part of the 70s, right? I want to say almost 3 decades.
Yep.
So when they did it, it was no longer black and white. They were in color. So the one that I chose one of those. I chose The Curse of Frankenstein. So this was the first one of a series. I think there was 5 of them, maybe? 5 or 6?
I think 6, actually. Yeah, there was quite a few of them.
Yeah. So this has Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, who you guys know from the Star Wars movies, the episode 4, right?
Yep.
4 and oh my God, what's the one that came before it? Rogue One. Right. So this is cool. This is a retelling and a kind of a reimagining of the Universal version of Frankenstein, the first one. But not quite what the book is. It's like, takes its liberties with the book, the original story, but it's a little bit different. The monster looks different in this. The way he resurrects the creature is different. He doesn't do the electricity in the whole dungeon and everything. It's more of a lab setting in this, and he puts him in some kind of a toxic bath, right?
Yep.
To get him going again. And Christopher Lee looks great, I think, as the monster.
It's pretty horrific, right?
Yeah, he's like stitched together and everything. He doesn't have the bolts on his neck like the traditional Frankenstein, but he still looks cool. He looks horrifying. His teeth are all messed up and stuff. So I thought it was a good interpretation of a reimagining of this classic story that Universal did. But now that since it's in color, it's a little more graphic and a little more gruesome.
Yeah.
No?
Definitely well done. Very different than the Universal film starring Karloff. And Hammer had a lot of issues where they could not duplicate the makeup, Karloff's trademark makeup from the original Frankenstein. So that's why they made him look so different. But I think different is good in this instance because he's absolutely disgusting looking.
Right. Yeah. The cinematography is nice. I think it's got that gothic feel throughout it. I kind of miss the locations though that the Universal movies have.
Yeah, agreed.
In this, it's kind of got it, but not quite like a Dracula one from the Hammer movies. So I think that's the only thing that's really missing from this. And the creature doesn't really show up until 45 minutes into it, maybe?
Yeah, well, you know what? All the Frankenstein films from Hammer really centered on Dr. Frankenstein, more so as the creature, every single one of them. And they actually made Peter Cushing's character, he's the monster in all these films, actually.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Which is a nice twist.
Yeah, the monster is kind of a byproduct of his insanity.
Yeah. And Cushing owned that role. I mean,
yes.
man, was he good.
Yeah, and he shows up in a couple Draculas too.
Yep. Yeah, as Van Helsing. Yeah. I mean, Cushing is one of our all-time greats. Whether you're talking horror or anything else, he is Mr. Class all the time. And no matter how bad the movie is, he puts in a great performance. He's kind of like Bela Lugosi in a way, who came before him. You know, Bela put in great performances in some of the shittiest films ever, but it was still Bela Lugosi, right? And he was still amazing.
Yeah. What else? What was I going to say about him? He's got a very like elegant like class to him when he's in the, and he's very distinguished in the way he talks and everything, and he's got a presence on screen.
I always call him the distinguished English gentleman. That's what Peter Cushing is. He's just amazing.
Yeah, so that's a good one, a good starter, a good reboot of these monsters. But unfortunately, though, when they did these in Hammer, there was only a couple Wolfmen movies. There was a series of Dracula, Frankenstein, and that was it.
Yeah, a couple mummy films.
A couple mummies. Film. Yeah, but what happened to the creature? One of the coolest designs, and nobody, took the ball and ran with it.
Yeah. Yep.
I never understood that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the whole creature thing, I think their reptile film kind of was like their giant reptile kind of creature to take place of the creature, but not quite the same.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. Although a good film though, I like Reptile.
Yeah, Reptile is weird and creepy.
Yeah, not one of my picks for today though. So no. I had no idea that I did this, but all three films that I picked today, all were released in 1971. Two of them were released in the theaters as a double bill. I had no idea until I was actually kind of writing down some notes here. So my first choice, I love this, directed by Roy Ward Baker, is Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde.
That one I'm not too familiar with, so I'm going to do
my homework. Rich, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. It's there's been a lot of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde movies. It's an interesting take because not only does it bring in the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story originally written by Robert Louis Stevenson, right? But they also bring in the Jack the Ripper storyline into this. They also bring in the what are those two guys called? Hold on, I'll get into a second here. Burke and Hare, which are those notorious two guys that would rob graves for body parts for various people throughout this time period. And it also has a little bit of Frankenstein in it because, again, you've got this kind of like demented doctor or physician, right, who's actually going and grave robbing or in this instance killing people to take certain body parts. So the whole story here is that Dr. Jekyll is looking for some sort of an answer to create like the ultimate human being, right? And he's got this idea in his head that female hormones are the way to do it. So what he starts doing is experimenting with injecting female hormones into first like insects and things like that, but then he starts to inject them into himself. But what he does is to get these hormones, obviously this is like a new idea, nobody's going to support this whole thing that he's got going on. So what he starts doing is he starts going out in the middle of the night to all the prostitutes in Whitechapel and starts killing the prostitutes and stealing their hormone glands.
That's like Jack the Ripper.
Exactly, right? So yes, exactly. So here, Dr. Jekyll is also Jack the Ripper. Cool. And then he's got the two guys, he's got Burke and Hare, the two guys who go out and do the killing for him, and they bring him dead women in the middle of the night.
Right.
So it's really interesting that he does all these experiments. So eventually he starts injecting himself with all of these hormones and things that he's putting together, and he actually changes into a female.
Huh.
So just like in the original story, he would change into this like beast of a creature, Mr. Hyde. Here he actually changes into Mrs. Hyde, who is like the female version of himself.
And it works?
And it works. And of course, she's absolutely gorgeous. So she's played, so Ralph Bates plays the Dr. Jekyll character here, and he's been in a bunch of Hammer films before. And then Martine Beswick plays Mrs. Hyde, and she's a former James Bond girl. Okay, she appeared in a couple of James Bond films. So she's totally hot as anything, right? So he keeps injecting himself, and he changes into her, and then changes back. And meanwhile, he's got like these neighbors in the apartment building he lives in. There's a brother and sister. So the sister falls in love with him. The brother falls for his alter ego, Mrs. Hyde. And then the whole movie, the rest of the movie is him going out. He starts to, it's like a battle of wills. Will he win out over the female side, right? So he keeps going out and killing and injecting, and then she starts going out when she's in control. When he changes to her, she starts going out and killing because she wants to be the main personality in this whole relationship. So she keeps going out and killing so she can be the dominant personality that wins out over Dr. Jekyll. So the whole film is this kind of like back and forth thing. And it's, if you love like Jack the Ripper, that's basically what this film is, with the Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, obviously, because he calls her his sister, who is recently widowed and is staying with him for a while, but nobody ever sees the two of them together. It's got lots of gore, lots of killings, and it just really, really good acting and a great climax, really good climax, which I won't spoil for everybody. But yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, really, really fun movie, and love the acting. And all the Hammer films have great looking women in them, right? So this one's no exception.
Yes, with
no
nice
exception
big,
there.
nice big boobs.
Yeah,
if we could say that on air here. Yeah, they're always, they're always well balanced.
Well endowed, yes. And this was actually Hammer's third adaptation of the Curious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. So they kept going back to the well here, but this one is really different and really good film. Love it. Just love it.
Cool. I'm going to check that out.
Yep.
All right. So my next choice is going to be, what do you think it's called?
Looks like The Skull to me.
The Skull. Yes. Yep. So this also has Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in it again. And those two guys are buying like artifacts and things. If you remember in the beginning of the movie, they're both collectors of like evil statues and things that are symbolic of like the dead. Yeah. Things that are connected to like hell and bringing back demons and bringing forth demons, things like that. So through their when they're making their bids, when you're at an auction, so they're at the auction, right? And they're battling it out between what they're trying to buy. And one of the guys finds out about the skull. It's Peter Cushing that's actually brought the skull.
Yeah.
Somebody brings it to him. So he offers him, this is at his house, they offer him a certain price for the skull and he decides to get it. So the story behind the skull was that it was taken from a person that was crazy and they were killed and buried, and somebody cut their head off when they were in the grave. And then they took the skull. So the skull was supposedly cursed. So anybody that had the skull with them, it would also drive them crazy. Right?
Yep.
So throughout the movie, Peter Cushing has this skull and he's battling with what's getting inside of his head. We don't know though if it's because of the skull or if it's just in his head alone, right? Because they never really tell you that throughout the story.
No, they don't.
But him and Christopher Lee, Christopher Lee actually had the skull first. Do you remember that?
Yep.
So he tells me, he's like, I had it. He's like, and you need to get rid of it. You shouldn't have it because it's evil. So it's cool. It's kind of like a story that questions, the existence of evil and spirits and things like that, or if you're really just going mad inside your head.
It's a good film.
Yes.
I dig it a lot.
Cool. Yeah.
I was just showing everybody the Blu-ray that I have, and it's a double feature on here. It's partnered up with The Man Who Could Cheat Death, which is also great. They're both really good. Yeah, I mean, a really cool film. I bet you there's a lot of folks out there who haven't seen The Skull. Well worth watching.
It's kind of a little supernatural, Every once in a while, you'll see the skull do one of these too. You're like, what's that all about? So it's cool. It makes you think about, whether or not there really is another, world out there with demons and things that can come and take over you.
Yep.
Or if you're just losing it and you're just listening to superstition.
Yep.
So yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Love it. Good choice. Good choice. Thanks. All right. Let's switch gears to a little vampire action, right?
Yeah.
How about Twins of Evil?
All right. That's a good one.
Love this one. Yeah. So, this basically, again, 1971, directed by John Huff, Houghs, however he says his name. This, again, stars Peter Cushing. He plays a character called Gustav Wheel in this movie. We got Damian Thomas plays Count Karnstein, right? Karnstein trilogy. This is the third in the series. And then you got Mary and Madeline Collinson, who were the twins in the film, and they were actually the first ever Playboy Playmate twins, right? Go figure. So basically, this whole story is so the twins, their parents want to get killed. I think they were killed in an accident or something like that. They don't really talk a lot about it, but they then have to go stay with their aunt and uncle who live out in the country, and that happens to be Peter Cushing and his wife. So Peter Cushing, he's actually he's part of this. They never really say exactly what he does. He's a homeowner, obviously, but he's part of this whole group called the Witch Hunters, the Brotherhood of the Witch Hunters, or they're called the Brotherhood, but they're witch hunters. So he's someone who's kind of in power in the town, and him and a lot of these townsfolk, they're very religious, and they actually go and anybody who they suspect of kind of doing things in a weird way, they say, okay, they're in league with the devil, specifically women, and they go and they take them prisoner and they burn them at the stake, right, as witches. Okay. So the beginning of this film, it's all about like witches, but really there are no witches. They think people are witches. But then you find out that in the castle, on the hill in this town is the Karnstein Castle, and that is actually, there's a lot of vampire lore that goes with that. And the former Countess Karnstein, or Countess Dracula, was what she was called originally, was killed in the second movie in this trilogy. So the movies we're talking about in this trilogy: The Vampire Lovers and Lust for a Vampire. Also Hammer Films, and Twins of Evil is actually the third in the series. So what winds up happening, long story short, is that the one sister, Marie is the good sister, and Frida is the kind of the suspect sister. Well, she takes a liking she meets Count Karnstein, takes a liking to him, and while this is all happening, he gets visited from the beyond the grave by his dead wife, okay, who winds up biting him, turning him into a vampire as well. So he kind of brings in Frida under his wing. He turns her into a vampire. All of a sudden, people around town are dropping dead here and there, left and right. The townsfolk eventually find out that she is a vampire. They catch her in the act of trying to kill someone out in the woods because she goes out every night. They abduct her, and then Peter Cushing is like, oh my God, how can I kill my niece, right? I have to burn her at the stake. But the Count, who's pretty clever in this film, he actually double crosses everybody and takes the twin sister, who is not a vampire, switches them out while they're in jail, right? So then they're actually going to burn the good sister at the stake. I won't tell the rest of the story, but it's got a great climax. A lot of vampire action here going on. As always, when it comes to the Hammer films, plenty of nudity, all that kind of stuff. Lots of blood, lots of gore. Great performance by Damian Thomas, who plays Count Karnstein, the vampire. He's like so over the top. It's great in typical Hammer fashion. The two twins are adorable. They carry the whole film. But Cushing is so good because in the beginning, he's like so self-righteous, and we have to burn the evil witches and all that kind of stuff. And he's really hard on his nieces and all this kind of stuff. But as the movie goes on, he finally starts to realize, the error of his ways. And maybe I'm being a little overbearing with all this. Maybe, these women that we've been killing have not been, witches and all that kind of stuff, when the real evil actually lurked up in the castle, right in their backyard type of thing. Really great sets. A lot of good atmosphere. The music is fantastic. It moves along pretty quickly, and it's got a great finale. So love it. The color of the film is great. The Blu-ray is excellent. Really, really good, crisp picture. And another winner from Hammer. Twins of Evil.
Nice. All right, I'm sticking with the vampires.
Cool.
And I know vampires are just so overdone, but you can't ignore the Christopher Lee movies that are in this series.
That's one of the granddaddies of them all right there.
Yeah, the Horror of Dracula.
Yeah,
this is a great one. It's pretty much a faithful retelling of the kind of like the Universal one, very similar to that. Where oh my God, what's the guy that goes to the house? I forgot his name right now. To do his books. He's
it's Renfield in the original film. But his real name, Jonathan Harker, is actually
Jonathan. Okay, so so he goes to the castle great location and sets. Oh my God, the castle and everything and the locations here are so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool. So, you know, it follows his story, and he discovers that there's a woman being trapped in the castle, and she wants to try and get out. He's trying to get her out, but they're both basically seduced by Dracula and his ways. I don't know what you want to call it. How he just, there's never explained how he seduces them. He doesn't
will. Yeah, his will, right?
His will that he brings upon them. It's not like the Bela Lugosi one where his eyes glow white. But he just gives you that deadly stare. You're under his control. So, you know, Jonathan gets bit as well, and then the rest of the story is kind of like I said, the Universal one, but the Christopher Lee, it's in color, so this has got a lot more. This has blood in it that you never saw in the Universal movie. So anytime he bites one of the girls,
all over his mouth,
there's all blood in his mouth. It's always dripping out of the corner of his mouth. Even when he's laying in the coffin.
Yep.
He's just laying there. It's a little bit coming out of both corners. It's something that the Universal movies did not have.
And the bloodshot red eyes. He's wearing contacts, right, to make
Yes. So it goes through him biting the two other girls, Mina and Lucy.
Yep.
He gets those two as well. The ending, I think, of these movies, because there's 6 of them, 7 of them, I think.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, 7 or 8. The story, they flow pretty well, but the ending, when they get to the climax and how Dracula dies and all these different stories, it's probably the best part of each of these endings, right?
Yeah.
It's always something different.
His deaths are spectacular, and yet then at the next movie, there he is again. You're like,
right?
What?
There's another story that finds Dracula. Yeah, and Peter Cushing's in this too. He's Van Helsing.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's mostly on screen more than even I think Christopher Lee, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. In all these films, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So once he comes and he shows up, he's the one that's chasing him like the traditional story. And it's
one of the to go back to the Frankenstein film. So the reason why Christopher Lee never appeared as Frankenstein again is because he felt really frustrated with having a role where he had no speaking lines. And it was the same thing when he did The Mummy, right? So he never wanted to repeat those films again. And actually, after I think like the second Dracula film, he had to be convinced to come back and play Dracula again, because in each film he had less and less to do, less presence, less lines, and they wound up paying him a shitload of money to do those films because he didn't want to do them. He's like, I have no lines. It's just me walking around, and so he was really frustrated. But the money was there, so they paid him. And but he was one of next to Lugosi, you could say Lugosi's the best ever, but Cushing is the one I think. Christopher Lee is the one who did the most with the character, I think, and really made it.
I think Christopher Lee's better actually. Because
Lugosi's iconic, but I've always said Lugosi had better roles than Dracula.
Yeah.
Whereas Christopher Lee was Dracula.
Right. The Universal ones were great for setting the stage. They created the monsters. Right. And the sets were nice too. But I think the hammer is what really gave it that kick in the ass that really made it horror. Yeah. When you watch the old Universal ones, they're not quite horror movies. They're more like dramas almost. Yep. With a gothic, spooky set piece, and a monster. Well, no, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein are kind of horror movies, I would say. And even the werewolf movie, Wolfman. But the Hammer movies injected it with something that the other franchise, didn't do. Because it was the time, they just didn't have the special effects. They didn't have the money. It was black and white. It was just a different time.
Yeah, and they could go a little further with the gore and with the shock value.
Right. Yeah. But also in these movies, though, there's a lot of that, like between Van Helsing and Dracula. It's a lot of the choking again, though. They never really went past what Universal did. Everybody's always getting choked and thrown to the ground. You kind of wanted some more out of them. Even Dracula. But like I said, the deaths that they do with Dracula, that's where the violence comes in. So they really upped the ante when they got to the ending of these movies, I think.
Yep, I agree.
But still, just the atmosphere and everything and the locations in this movie and the retelling of this is still worth it.
Top notch. It's one of the best Dracula or vampire films of all time.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's it's in color. It just brings it to life, and that's what the monsters really needed. That's why it's very disappointing that they never did a creature movie. Yeah. No one has done. No one has done one.
Yeah, I know. Really strange after all these years, right?
Yeah, the only time you've seen him was in the Monster Squad.
Right.
I never understood that.
Yeah. And Man Monster Party. He was in there too.
Yeah.
All right, my last choice for today, directed by Seth Holt, also in 1971. This was actually the double feature with Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb.
Great title. They have such great titles.
Oh, yeah. And that is the beautiful Valerie Leon on the cover, also a James Bond girl.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for me, one of the most beautiful women in any Hammer film. So this is an interesting movie because even though it's got like mummy in the title, not your typical mummy film. So there's no guy in the bandages walking around or anything like that. And this is actually adapted from a Bram Stoker novel titled The Jewel of the Seven Stars. Okay, so it's all about this ancient Egyptian queen named Terra, who is not really a good person. And she gets, of course, the whole mummy treatment. She gets like put to death and locked up all these years, all these artifacts and so on and so forth. And the film starts off, you got the character Andrew Keir, who's the father of the female character, that's Valerie Leon. And he's like a professor and he goes to ancient Egypt and they find, her resting place. And of course, they take a bunch of the artifacts. Some are missing though, right? And they take her body, okay, which is perfectly preserved, but she's obviously dead. And the whole film centers on the fact that this ancient Egyptian queen looks exactly like his daughter, okay? And he knows it, of course. So he winds up giving her as a birthday present this gigantic red scarab ring, right? He tells her to wear it at all times. After he gives her that ring, she starts having these weird dreams. Like, she's remembering these things that never happened to her, of course, because now there's this connection between her and the dead Egyptian queen. And little by little, everybody who was associated with that expedition, weird things start happening to them. And it's this whole drama that goes on where little by little she starts getting taken over by the spirit of this Egyptian queen. And the climax is really, really cool because it like brings them both together in the same place at the same time. Okay. And eventually the queen awakens, right? Because they've got all the different artifacts that needed to bring her back to life. There's this like the snake statue, there's the raven, there's like a knife, all sorts of stuff that they get together. And it's really a very well crafted film. There's plenty of deaths and blood and all that kind of stuff, but it's not quite as violent as some of the other films that Hammer put out, but really well acted and just really chilling in a great climax. And for a mummy film, excuse me, it's quite different. And I think refreshingly so. And it paces really good. And like I said, you got, Valerie, who's great to look at throughout the whole film as well. So that always helps, right? But really cool. And it's really interesting to see like all, how one by one, all these people that are associated with everything that's going on get knocked off one by one. And with all these kind of really inventive deaths and everything like that leads up to the final act of the film. But really, really cool. Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. Definitely worth checking out. It's definitely one of those horror films from Hammer that don't get enough credit, and it's definitely one of the good ones. So
mummy movies are always a little slow because the mummy moves slow.
Yeah.
Whether it's Universal or Hammer, they were just kind of it's a slow creature, so the movies are slow.
And I always love the mummy itself. Like for me, I always love, Lon Chaney Jr., with all that mummy wrappings just lumbering around and, walking up and grabbing someone by the throat and strangling them to death. And you're always like, well, how is it they couldn't run away from this guy, right? Because this creature is like moving like a snail, but somehow he always manages to catch up to him. I mean, you can hear him coming a mile away because he's dragging that leg, right? Yeah. It's not like he's quiet or anything like that. So yeah. That's why I like this one, because it's very different from that.
That's cool. They need to when you were talking about the werewolf movies on one of your shows, they need to do a reboot of these monsters like they did with Universal and Hammer, but instead do it like they did with the Benicio del Toro one that they did in 2010.
I agree 100%.
They should have taken what they did with that movie and started the new series of movies, because that was so well done.
Yeah.
and they kept it to the classic monsters design.
They did. They had that gothic feel to it. They kept the same period. Like, did you see the Tom Cruise Mummy film?
No, I mean, yes, but no, I don't want to see it again. No, it was like in Indiana Jones with Tom Cruise and a mummy. I don't know. It's not a mummy movie, you know? No. And the other one, what was it? Dracula Untold?
Yeah, that I didn't mind. That's pretty good for what it is. Could have been better, right?
But I thought they were supposed to be part of that whole universe, and then
they kind of scrapped it because the films just aren't performing. Yeah, it's it's a shame.
They should have stuck with what they did with the Wolf. They should have stuck with the Wolfman and just taken that and ran with it.
Well, that's what they wanted to. And unfortunately, with these big film studios, they want to make them modern. They want to appeal to a younger demographic. It's like, but they're not working, right? So whatever they're trying to do just isn't happening. So
because no one cares. They don't want, you don't want to just appeal to a younger audience or that demographic, because they're not going to care later anyway. You just got to make a good movie for what it is and stick to what you want to do. And good, they're going to like it regardless.
Yep. Yeah. You know what? My opinion with this stuff now, after like one disappointment after another with them trying to reboot these films, it's like there's so many of these old classic horror films that are out there that I own most of them. I could just keep rewatching for the rest of my life, and I'm good with that.
It might be that way for now.
Yeah, and that's you know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Because they haven't done anything since The Mummy or Dracula Untold, right? That's it.
That's it. Yeah, nothing since.
They tried doing The Invisible Man, but that was so far from the original anyway.
Yeah, that was not good. Not good.
Which that was actually cool too.
Yeah, I don't know.
The original.
I didn't care for it too much. Yeah. It wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't awful. She was great in it, but I just.
No, I mean the black and white one. The original one was cool.
Oh, the original one. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Oh, I thought you were talking about the remake that they just did.
No, I didn't even see it yet, but I heard good things about it.
Yeah, I heard good things about it too, and I watched it and I was very disappointed.
Oh, okay.
But the original Invisible Man is fantastic.
Very cool. Yes, very cool. And very great camera tricks that they did.
For 1932. Hell yeah.
And it worked great. Even though it's not a Hammer movie, that's highly recommended, I'd say.
Yeah, that's way ahead of its time. The Invisible
Man,
so.
Absolutely.
In fact, I think I did a show here on the Monsters Den of the Invisible Man, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kick-ass. Cloud Rains, man. Awesome.
Nice. Oh, yeah. Yep. That's one of my favorites.
So there you have it. You got 6 Hammer recommendations. I'm sure Rich is up to it. I want to do another episode of this.
Yeah, I would do. Would you want to do? I mean, what genre or what series? What are you thinking of?
I want to do part 2 of Hammer.
Part 2 of Hammer. Okay.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Okay.
Part 2 of Hammer. I can't get enough Hammer, man. Can't get enough Hammer. So I'm ready for more. So
okay.
So if you guys want to see more Hammer, we'll do more Hammer. I mean, quite frankly, we could do like 10 Hammer episodes at this rate. There's so many damn films. So
there is so many.
So Rich and I will talk about it. We'll get back to you, but I would expect in about a week you'll see another Hammer episode, as well as other stuff, because there's so many other avenues to tackle here while we're still not quite at Halloween yet. So we'll try and squeeze as many as we can. So
got a week to go.
That's right. So everybody visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Rich, you want to plug anything on your end?
The Metal Asylum that I write for, Brave Words, Metal Hall of Fame, and Am I Evil graphic novel, which actually just made its crowdfunding.
I saw that. Congratulations. So,
thank you. So that's cool. So that'll be in the works soon, hopefully.
Very good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Lots of good news there. So
thanks. And thanks for having me again, as always.
I know, exactly.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Love talking monster films. So
yes, I know. And horror.
So
yeah, because we did Hellraiser.
I am Pete Pardo Rich Catino.
Yes.
See everybody.
Cheers.
For the next time, the Monsters Den. Come and visit if you dare.